Hi, I'm Naka Kondo from Economist Impact, and welcome to this discussion, Shipping Panel, Sharing the Responsibility to Reduce Emissions. I'm joined today by three excellent and very experienced panelists. Johannah Christensen, Chief Executive of Global Maritime Forum. Welcome, Johannah. Benjamin Wong, Head of Transport, Infrastructure, and Advanced Manufacturing, InvestHK. Thank you. Hi. And Kelvin Leung, Chief Executive, DHL Global Forwarding Asia Pacific. You will find the full biographies of our panelists right under the screen under this media player. Now, shipping amounts to 2 to 3% of man-made emissions globally every year, and collaboration across supply chains is essential to reduce maritime emissions. What steps have been introduced to engage cargo owners in the emissions conversation, and what more must be done? Johannah, we've just had COP26, and we'd love to hear what your outlook is in the decarbonization of shipping after COP26, and a hectic period with a lot of initiatives and collaboration about this huge challenge for the shipping industry.
Thank you, Naka. Yeah, so it's been an exciting period. COP26 has served as an important focal point for the sector in terms of understanding and creating alignment across the sector on what is needed in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and beyond. And I think one of the really important sort of messages that I take away from COP26 is exactly this aligned understanding around the necessity to decarbonize shipping in order to decarbonize the global economy, with its essential role as sort of the backbone of international trade. And that's something that I think is really important to see, and it really has raised the level of attention on the need to decarbonize shipping, and it's also led the sector to sort of step up its efforts. And as you rightly say, there have been a lot of initiatives and announcements in the immediate run-up to COP26. Some examples are a call to action that we were the primary drivers around, which calls for the full decarbonization of international shipping by 2050, signed by over 200 stakeholders from across the maritime spectrum. There was an announcement by a group of cargo owners, consumer goods companies, the cargo owners for zero-emission vessels that committed to transporting their cargoes on zero-emission vessels by 2040. There have been a whole range of other announcements over the past months that have sort of created this sort of crescendo, if you will, in the lead up to COP26. And it was interesting to see at COP then to see governments respond quite clearly. So with multiple groups of countries, 60 in total, responding to that call from industry in saying that they too will be working towards a full decarbonization of international shipping, both in terms of the long-term objectives, but also on some of the short-term efforts. For example, there was an announcement, the Clydebank Declaration signed by, I think it's at present 22 countries, that will be working together on establishing green corridors. This was led by the UK government, signed by the US, Japan, Australia, many other countries. So that's really exciting to see this sort of emerging consensus, I think, and focus both on the long and the near-term actions needed to achieve our collective objectives.
Thank you. So I just have a follow-up question. So what is the importance of collaboration here?
So what we see is that the decarbonization of shipping is going to require a full value chain collaboration. So ship owners and operators, engine manufacturers, shipbuilders, but just as much cargo interests, the financial sector, energy sector, who are the providers of future zero emission fuels, ports and infrastructure, who have to put in place the sort of the infrastructure to the bunkering infrastructure to make those fuels available in the right places, etc. So there's a whole range of stakeholders that need to work together. And of course, governments will play a key role as well in putting in place the different regulations that we need, but that's also at the local and regional level.
Thank you. No, thank you for that, Johannah. And now I'd like to turn to Kelvin. Johannah just referred to the importance of collaboration, but then I think, Kelvin, you spoke about the importance of acting now. And there is a sense of urgency. And I think it's important that we all understand the relevance of this issue on a day-to-day. So how relevant really is this topic to our audience?
Well, thank you for the questions, and I believe it is extremely relevant. Well, to start off with, we have seen the recent case of the flooding in Germany, in Europe, which never happened. So global warming is already here. And then if you look at nearer geographically here, we have seen typhoons being formed from areas which have never been before. So it is already affecting us. Now, coming back to our industry specifically, I think Johannah mentioned about the collaboration, and to me, it matters a lot because in terms of the supply chain, in terms of our industry, there are many, many stakeholders. Case in point, even the flagship, the vessel flag countries, which have nothing to do with the whole transportation, but they do bear the registration of the vessels. They may impose certain regulations that will speed up the process. And another case in point is also about the seaport, the terminals. We do need a lot of infrastructure, new infrastructure to cater and to address, even if we talk about biofuels, we talk about e-fuels, we need those infrastructure. And it cannot be done by the carriers themselves or by the users themselves. Now, in terms of the relevance to the audience, I believe, there will be the end consumers and there will be the users of the supply chains. Now, we know that all of our consumers, we know that more and more companies are getting more into the ESG arenas, and everyone's paying utmost attention and prioritizing the importance of this topic. If we, being the service provider, we do not start now, then our users, our customers, and our end consumers will not have the options and the choice. So we have to put our acts together and start working on this topic right now.
Thank you for that. Yes, there's a sense of urgency. Now I'd like to turn to Benjamin. I understand Hong Kong is an international maritime center. And so could you tell us a little bit about the commitments that Hong Kong government has already started to make?
Thank you, Naka. Yes, I think both Johannah and Kelvin mentioned very well that about the urgency of the decarbonization, the sustainability. And I think earlier there was this description for code red for humanity. So I think actually this is something that we have urgency to do it. Now, while China has committed to the 2060 carbon neutrality, Hong Kong, we have also committed to achieve net zero by 2050. Now, as you know, Hong Kong is a very small city. So I think in terms of the complexity of doing it, we are actually probably much simpler than many other places. Now, we try to achieve zero emission, try to achieve a livable city, and also another goal is sustainable development. So these three are the main goals. And how we go about it, one thing it is that we start with the power generation, power source, because actually I mentioned our economic structure is quite simple. So actually the power generation contributes quite a big portion to the greenhouse gas emission. So that's one thing. Now the power companies that here that they are also committed to switch to coal-firing to other cleaner fuel, including LNG. Then we have, of course, transportation, which is the second biggest contributor to the greenhouse gas emission in Hong Kong. Now, obviously, supply chain, shipping, all that is something that we have to pay attention to. We have started with the passenger vehicle roadmap results, but then at the same time, we are also working on the other parts of the transportation chain. Then, of course, is the circular economy, how we could recycle the usage rather than taking out from the Earth, planet Earth. So this is the third item that we are working on. Now, all this actually, it needs to have the new technology to achieve it. That's why we are putting a lot of resources on the technology development. So across the board, not only for decarbonization, but across the board, the government has committed $130 billion for the next few years on technology development. And then for the climate change mitigation and adaptation, we have committed to have $240 billion over the next 15 years to deal with it. So all this needs to have the financial resources, and of course this is only the parts contributed by the government. But then I think Hong Kong has a very strong financial platform for green financing, green fundraising. So that's another bit.
Thank you very much. This is it's a great segue. I think we've heard from all the panelists so far that there is a really renewed and stronger commitment to actually achieve this. And so I think now the question is, we probably would like to gain an understanding of where and how collaboration can make a difference in achieving maritime decarbonization, whether it be this funding, financing, innovation, technology, or communication. So I'd like to come back to Johannah, and then I'm going to ask the same question to Kelvin and Benjamin after that. So Johannah, please.
Well, thank you, Naka. I think all of the above is what's needed. It's why we started the Getting to Zero Coalition. The Getting to Zero Coalition is an alliance of over 150, I think we're close to 170 stakeholders from across the global maritime spectrum. It's everything from ship owners and operators to ports, to energy companies, financial institutions, and others working together on bringing zero-emission vessels on the water, operating on the deep seas on a commercial basis by 2030. So really focusing on how do we achieve near-term objectives to decarbonize shipping. Interestingly, and I think what Benjamin might be interested to hear, is that the ambition of the Getting to Zero Coalition, so this objective of zero-emission vessels operating on the deep seas on a commercial basis, was an output of the Global Maritime Forum's annual summit in Hong Kong that was held in 2018 there, and in fact it became the impetus for establishing the Getting to Zero Coalition, which now has so many stakeholders working together, and they work together in a range of different ways. Some members of the coalition work specifically on putting in place the fuel supply and understanding how we can get some of the sort of close the supply and demand gap, if you will, or this sort of the dilemma, by bringing together both the fuel producers but also the ship owners, the cargo owners, etc., in closing that supply and demand gap. That's one area. There's another area where that's focused on the sort of fuels and technologies that are needed to decarbonize international shipping. So looking at what are some of the investment needs, what are some of the innovation needs, and creating alignment around the understanding what are the fuel pathways that might get us to a full decarbonization of the sector. I think there's a growing consensus that they will be green hydrogen, already an important step in the right direction where that is concerned. And another work stream is looking at what will it take to make the transition equitable, to make it just. This is a transition that not only the big important trade hubs such as Hong Kong or the US stand to benefit from, but many countries around the world can be providers of and producers of zero emission fuels in the future, but will also rely on transportation services that may be more expensive than we have become used to. And so how do we make sure that they are part of the transition? How do we make sure that new zero emission technologies are safe for seafarers? So there's a whole range of issues that need to be addressed collaboratively, and that's part of the focus of the Getting to Zero Coalition and why it exists as a collaborative platform.
Thank you, Johanna. Benjamin, you're free to address the fact that Hong Kong, I understand, is part of this Zero coalition. So would you like to share with us on that aspect?
Now, for the getting the Zero Coalition actually is a fantastic arrangement to have the industry players coming together and commit to it. Now, I think for the Hong Kong shipping community, we've got players who are also committed to it. I think this is something that we as Hong Kong as an international shipping hub that we try to do, contribute to the international global shipping economy and also the sustainability. Now, for the Hong Kong government, we have a platform which is known as Carbon Neutrality Partnership. Now, this is not confined to the shipping community, but then I think it is a very good platform to showcase what Naka, you have mentioned earlier on the collaboration efforts, because this is an industry and also government collaboration effort, which the industry players, they commit to set their carbon neutrality targets on this platform. Now, our Environment Bureau also have this 4T suggestion, which is target, timeline, and for the target and timeline, of course, is about commitment on setting a goal on whatever to achieve within the sustainability arena, and also what time to do it, because I think the first item we mentioned earlier was about the urgency. So the timeline is very important. And then the transparency, being committed to do it actually, of course, is always more efficient when it is being monitored and also scrutinized. So having the transparency is the other very important element. So all this actually is very important to get this achieved. Now, I think looking at bigger picture actually is very important to have a global collaboration, because I think it is shipping is a very global industry. So now on this, actually, I think earlier Johanna mentioned about the supply of the whatever new fuel, right? The stability of it, the availability of it, and then of course, very importantly, the cost of it also. But that's only one element. There are other efforts we can do on the sustainability in the shipping industry. Now, for example, efficiency of the machinery, that's one thing. Or for example, the hydrodynamic on the design of the ships, that's another thing. And then there are other technology, right? For example, even as small as having, the coating on the vessels. Now there is a technology on creating bubbles on the coating to reduce the friction on the boats, and I think it's actually a very fantastic and also in a way a very romantic way of reducing friction for the vessels. But I think these are on all on the physical side. But then there are also other non-physical, non-tangible technology. For example, using AI, for example, for better route planning. Or for example, to have a better weather forecast to plan the routes. So all these are actually important elements to develop. So I think bottom line is that the collaboration is across the whole chain. So it's very important that the whole chain work together.
Thank you, Benjamin. And Kelvin, where and how can collaboration make a difference in achieving decarbonization?
Well, certainly, Johanna and Benjamin has mentioned many examples. From our side, we believe that ranging from the transparency of the reporting of figures, right? We need a global, mutually agreed, science-based method to report and to calculate the targets. That's number one, and that requires everyone globally to agree upon. And then based on that, we need to have a very intense collaboration in terms of the investment of the changes. Now, by one count, there are studies suggesting that globally, if we are seriously about this carbon neutral target, we're talking about $1.4 to $1.9 trillion globally. Now, we do need a very close collaboration among many sectors many parties in terms of looking for this funding, right? It cannot be borne singly by end consumers. It has to be sort of co-funded by many parties. Now, then it comes to the development and also the science research into the new fields. Now, this is particularly important in terms of collaboration, because today, whether we talk about biofuels, whether we talk about e-fuels, nothing has been proven, right? So we need a closer collaboration, and it cannot be achieved by a single country. It has to be a collaboration among many countries and many NGOs like Johannah's organization, and we need the push also from the government side, like Benjamin's organization, to make it work. Infrastructural changes doesn't happen on its own. It requires a lot of stimulus plans, subsidies, as well as organizations, and also regulations, right? Just now I mentioned at the beginning about even the registrations of the flag countries. They also own the responsibility in terms of pushing the carbon neutrality agenda among the users, the carriers. Lastly, of course, is education. Now, education means not just the user, but literally every one of us, the 7.8 billion people on Earth. Everyone has to be educated about how important it is, what's at stake, and who has the responsibilities, and who and what each of us can do now. Now, as DHL, we also have been providing all this education, e-learning to all of our 570,000 employees globally. We are also pushing the agenda with all the business partners that are cooperating, working, and having businesses with DPDHL. So by pushing the agenda, by communicating to them what we require, we also push ahead the agenda quicker and sooner before it's too late. And I think that is also very important, education among all stakeholders. And that's why partnership collaborations are key.
Thank you very much, Kelvin, and also for sharing some things that your company is doing. And that's a great segue, because I actually have another question for you, which is that I understand DHL is launching new initiatives in the CO2 compensation for all LCL less than a container load shipments. What is this, and how is it going to work?
Right. Well, as a group, we are already committing to spend 7 billion euros in the coming years to go green. And we aim to be carbon neutral by 2050. And as you mentioned, we have already started. Number one, of course, is the usage of biofuels. We have already in place LCL, less than container load, as well as full container load, FCL, products that we can offer to our customers that is carbon neutral. Now, what we are doing is that we base on a scientific way to calculate the consumption of the fuels of these LCL or FCL shipments and translate it into the carbon dioxide emissions. And we work out what sort of biofuels which are sustainable, not the ones that are coming from non-sustainable sources of crop and agricultural products, but on purely sustainable crop sources and supplies. And we calculate the amount of sustainable biofuels that will be required to make that shipment, whole transportation journey carbon neutral. And then we buy the equivalent fuel and then use it with the carriers. And this is how we provide such a solution to our customers. While we are speaking, we are already also piloting the same concept onto our aviation fuels. Of course, this is more difficult because, say, for instance, biokerosene is far more difficult to source, and it's not readily available in many airports. So we are piloting, possible solutions to address that. So these are just some examples that we are coming up, to get ourselves into carbon neutral.
Thank you very much. It's really encouraging to hear these kind of tangible steps that institutions, companies, and parties are taking. And I have a question for Johannah. So, we've been talking about these, what to me sounds like large-scale, collaborations, but I'd also be interested to hear what could be really done at a local level, and if those efforts would make an impact or make a difference.
So I think Kelvin actually pointed to some of them, and those I think are the ones that are most important in the near term, which is to start getting in place some of the larger scale testing of new fuels and putting that in place, and that's both on ships, in infrastructure, etc. So we talk about them as sort of full value chain demonstration projects, getting those underway, and that's something that can be driven locally. So anywhere where there's a significant sort of community, I guess, or a trade hub can do that. That could be Hong Kong, that could be Singapore, that could be Rotterdam, that could be, but also some of the big other trading hubs, Australia, Japan, and the like, right? So really putting in place these sort of where we test the technologies, but at an industrial scale. So not just at a small scale, which I think there are lots of pilots and research and development underway, but testing them in real world condition. I think that's the big next hurdle that we need to overcome. So this is something that we're very focused on. We've got a whole group of the Getting to Zero Coalition stakeholders working on what we call first mover projects. So bringing together those stakeholders that can work on developing these demonstration projects.
Thank you, Johannah. And Benjamin, so we're hearing the steps that we could take, but ultimately when it at the bottom line, for instance, will shippers and cargo owners accept, for instance, lower delivery times and or an increase in costs to kind of address this issue?
Now, I think you mentioned about two parts, right? One is on the slower time, and the other part is on the higher cost. Now, on the slower time, actually, I think now if we look back on the history of ships, vessels, now I think the vessels nowadays, actually, in terms of the speed, I think is going around now. In terms of speed, actually, vessels back in the 70s, 80s, actually, I gathered that they could actually travel faster in terms of speed than vessels now. But then because of the cost of on the fuel, then actually now the engine is more efficient at a slower speed. So actually, the speed they're traveling now is actually slower than before. But then in terms of the actual delivery time of like cargo, actually you don't see them being lengthened or longer than before. Rather, it's actually shorter. So I think it's a matter of how to deal with it. Now, I think it takes a lot of different things, right? Route planning being one, and then the other smarter use of technology is another thing. So that's on the delivery time, because I think if you have proper preparation and planning, then actually this will not be a big issue. But then on the cost side, actually, it's one thing that I think Hong Kong, as you know, we have a very strong financial platform. That's why we believe that the green financing could actually be carried out and being used to deal with the cost. Because now sustainability and being green actually is costing financial resources for sure. But then nowadays, actually, I think all companies, including banks and financial institutions, they have a commitment to have a greener portfolio. What it means is that it is the financial institutions, they're also under pressure to provide green financing. So when further down the road, actually, I think is going to be switched like this, right? Before right now, maybe there are a lot of non-green financing, but then actually portfolio, but then that will be switched to the green financing portfolio, no matter it is because of the governance or because of the commitment, no matter it's voluntary or involuntary. So actually, this is something that in the longer term, then the green financing cost actually could be easier and lower. So I think it's a matter of making use of the system and to reduce the cost of green financing. Now for Hong Kong, actually, we have different government initiative on green bonds, so actually that's aiming at encouraging companies to do this green bond issuance in Hong Kong and also to reduce the cost for them. So that's only one part of it. So I think there is a lot of things that you could do with it by the green financing.
Naka, can I just supplement?
Kelvin, please. Yes.
Because we all often talk about the big bill, right? The 1.4 to 1.8 trillion dollars. However, in the bigger scheme of things, right? If we look at how much we are investing into existing energy sectors infrastructure every year, and imagine that how much we are paying for the damages and all the things that are caused as a result of global warming, with all the natural disasters. This bill is actually nothing compared to what we are suffering. And I think this is a very important perspective that a lot of our people have to understand. It looks like it's a big number, but when comparing to how much we are spending today, and you look at some of the government budgets, this 1.something trillion is not really such a big bill over a period of the next few years.
Thank you very much for this, Kelvin. And I'd now like to actually go around the room from each speaker to address the top 3 key steps in the coming years in advancing this important yet, of course, challenging task. How can we move forward, and what will be the 3 key things that you would highlight today? So Johannah, please.
I was worried you were going to go to me first, because I actually have to come up with 3 things. For me, they're collaboration. So that's very easy. I also just want to applaud Kelvin's point. I think you make an excellent point before, Kelvin. The investments needed it sounds like a lot, but it is nothing in the grand scheme of things compared to the investments that are happening in existing energy infrastructure and that are broadly needed. I mean, it is really a drop in the water. And here we can play a really important part. I think the other thing that we can see with shipping is it can as a first mover sector in decarbonizing, it can unlock the global supply of green hydrogen-based fuels and the like, and so investments in the energy infrastructure that's needed to decarbonize other industrial sectors. So there's a real opportunity with the kind of investment that is needed to decarbonize shipping. But collaboration, in short.
Thank you. Benjamin.
Yes. Now, I think I have only one thing, which is collaboration. Now, I think what Johannah mentioned earlier about the Clyde Bank Declaration, which is actually one very fantastic initiative to get things in perspective and also in motion. Now, I think when it comes to the decarbonization for the shipping community, actually one big headache, I think, initially is that shipping is a very global industry. And from the whole world, where should it start? Now with the Climate Bank Declaration, then we will have the corridors which we could get things moving. I think it is kind of like one term being used very often in the tech sector is the sandbox, right? To get things confined and then get it, kind of like tested and commissioned. So I think the Climate Bank corridor, that declaration on having the emission-free shipping corridor is kind of like the sandbox, which we can have an environment to have different elements along the way being planned and implemented and then used. So I think then you can see that on that, then you would have the field, the bunkering, and then different ports getting prepared, both the water side and the land side. So I think this is something which is very important, fantastic, and of course it means collaborations within the industry, among the industries, and also among the countries.
Thank you very much. And Kelvin, please.
Thank you, Naka. So I will echo what Johannah and Benjamin mentioned about collaboration/partnership. Certainly, it's a lot of stakeholders in the whole picture, and we need the highest cooperation among ourselves. Now, I would add three other things, though. Number one is that we need a science-based methodology to calculate the actual reporting and the consumption and the emission, and therefore set a science-based target for all the different stakeholders. And we need to do this scientifically without any politics, and that's very important. Number two, I think, there are many ideas and models of carbon neutrality, from carbon capturing to offsetting. But I personally believe that the most important is actually insetting and not offsetting. Capturing, it might come, but it will probably take even longer time to make it possible. So I think the immediate thing is about insetting and not even offsetting. Now, to be successful in terms of insetting, we need to spend a lot of investment into the R&D of fuels and the study and the science of fuel. Sustainable biofuels, e-fuels that are based on very sustainable sources of power to generate, even you name it, ammonia or hydrogen, whatever it is, it has to be generated by sustainable power. So I think the investment into the field of fuel science is paramount in the whole success of this journey. Lastly, I think, to me, I mentioned earlier, is the importance of education. I think you'll be surprised. There are still people who simply do not believe in the urgency of this very important topic. And we do need to educate, have more facts, have more realities of what's going on Earth, that we need to tell our current and, more importantly, the future generations what they have to start working on and act now. And that's my 3 points.
Thank you, Kelvin. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists. Johannah and Benjamin, you and Kelvin, you all emphasized the importance of collaboration. And finally, Kelvin, you, I think, pointed out the 3 important steps. I mean, we need to be able to have a methodology of measuring and reporting consumption and the emission, and also have scientifically crafted target for each of the stakeholders to achieve, which is not influenced by politics. And then the importance of carbon insetting and of fuel science, and of finding the importance and the relevance and of sustainable fuels and energy. And of course, finally, the importance of education. And hopefully today we're all now a little more knowledgeable about the importance and relevance of this issue to us all. So thank you on that note. I'd like to thank Johannah Christensen, Benjamin Wong, and Kelvin Leung for your time and for your valuable insights. So here now, I'd like to introduce the next session of the event, Shipping, Addressing the Economics of Alternative Fuels. Thank you and goodbye.